Shows
Good.
all. This is pretty good.
Okay. Oh,
Hey,
good morning.
good morning to
Yeah, it's
you.
early, huh? This is like probably one of the earlier podcasts that I've done. Usually they're like, Christopher and I did one, and it was like 12:30 at night, and we're just like, okay, this is. I mean, it was good because then you get like all your tired thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You know. Thank you for making the drive.
Yeah, of course.
And I know you were just here last night too, so.
Yeah, well, I came for the free coffee, so
Yes, perfect. That's why I have it. That's really the only reason
incentive. Yeah,
is to just draw people in with coffee. That's really it.
it's a good
But
vibe. So
oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate that. That is one thing that I do get a lot. Is that it's a vibe.
yeah, it's comfortable. If anything, I think they'll encourage people to maybe overstay. So
Yeah, that has happened. I have run into that where it's just like I'm packing up to go and like grabbing my laptop, putting my shoes on, like getting all my shit to leave, and everyone's just like here comfortable, which it makes my heart so happy. But there are times where it's just like I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here. Like I gotta go. Or I've had it where it's just like, okay, just lock the door when you leave. Bye. But yeah, no, it's good. It makes me really, really happy because I've always wanted a space that people were obviously really comfortable in.
yeah,
So
well,
kind of just want to like introduce yourself a little bit and kind of just like, you know, kick off with who you are and
sure. Well, my name's Dominic Lucenti. I've
Is it
been
Lucenti or Lucenti?
once upon a time it was Lucente, and
Say
then
it how it is.
it's Lucenti now.
Okay.
So when my ancestors came over, my great grandparents, when they came over, they were Lucente, and then when they were processed,
Okay.
it became Lucenti. To sound more American.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
which they were proud of.
Sure.
At that
Sure.
point, the war was going on, so they were kind of excited about being, not being Italian.
Yeah.
Which now, I look at it and I'm like, why?
Yeah, right,
But
I know.
I guess living back then when all that stuff was going on, I get it.
Mhm.
But I've been training in the martial arts for about 23 years. I love everything about martial arts. I grew up on kung fu movies. So even before I started training, I was addicted to Jet Li movies. And do you remember Strawberries? This might be,
Yeah.
this is dating myself.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I used to go to Strawberries and they had a martial arts section because they sold movies too. It was music and movies, it was everything. And I remember going in there and looking at all these cool things. Like, oh yeah, Jet Li, Once Upon a Time in China, the trilogy. So I had this whole collection of VHSs and DVDs, and I knew I wanted to train one day. But my parents, were I was a wild child, so. But once I did get in, I fell in love with it, and I take every opportunity I can to learn. So
Nice.
that's me.
So how old were you when you started?
I was 15.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So, which I think is a good age. I think there's like a positive and a negative. There's definitely diminishing returns the younger you start, but at the same time, like it gives you, an extra leg up, even if everything you learned from 8 to 10 as a 10-year-old you could have learned in maybe 1 year. You still have a year head start now, so that you wouldn't have gotten if you started at 9. Then you would have been behind. So it is diminishing returns, but it gives you such a nice foundation. And then I think the discipline and getting used to learning how to learn, does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, learning how to learn, I feel like that's the most important part about starting on that younger side, because then when you get to 10 you kind of understand, and you pick up on nuance more than you could if you started fresh as a white belt. I originally started martial arts. I was not a super popular kid.
It's okay, no, was I.
So I was pretty nerdy, and school was tough back then, and a lot of it I think I brought on myself. I think I had such a desire to be liked that I kind of created the opposite reaction most of the time. And so I definitely had my fair share of bullying, So part of me, had that, romanticized vision of me like, fighting hordes of bullies, with my kung fu skills. So when I got the opportunity, I was actually at a church youth group, and one of my buddies came in, and he had just gotten in from, I think, one of his karate classes, and he had his gi on, and he was wearing his belt, and I was like, "Whoa, hold the phone! You you do karate? Like,
You're like a ninja.
I need to know this. How do I become a disciple?" you know, and he was awesome. He was nice enough. He brought me in, and my teacher, gave me a free class. He wanted me to experience it, and I fell in love from day one. And it wasn't like this super nice facility either. It was, we were on a carpet. It was dirty. There was um, a air conditioner that would spit ice cubes. So,
So safe.
yeah, it was a long time ago, and whenever we did kicks, my instructor would have to turn us on the corner so we didn't kick the person in front of us. And then he eventually ended up moving to a really nice new facility, which was awesome. But it was cool. I didn't go there because of the facility. I went there because I fell in love with what my instructor was teaching and the way he taught, which I know you have an awesome relationship with yours, so I'm sure you understand.
Yeah.
I taught or I trained for a few years, I think 3 or so years, and then I got into the instructor program and I started learning how to teach. And then a couple more years down the road, I was teaching almost full time, and it was some of the best days of my life. I loved just teaching kids and adults, but especially like teens were one of my favorite groups.
Why is
So
that?
I think because I was a teen,
Sure.
so I knew how I wanted to be treated when I was 15. Um, I didn't want to be talked to like a child, but at the same time, I appreciated the structure that we don't give the adults as much. You know, so it was that fine line, and I just thought they were fun. You know,
Yeah.
so I did that for years, and then ended up stepping away, and just to kind of find out where I was going. My life was kind of in a weird, chaotic place. So I stepped away and I tried some other things like kung fu. And then me and my girlfriend at the time, we decided we were going to kind of travel across the country to Fort Wayne. Lived there for 5 years, working in various jobs. But I got into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which I adore. I love it. It's so much fun. And I feel like it was such a nice supplement to what I did. And then my instructor called me and for actually a baby shower. And I went down there. While I was down there, I had mentioned that we were getting a little homesick, and he had an awesome opportunity. And he said, "Hey, well, we're looking to you know put someone in a school and eventually open up a new school, kind of near that one. Is that something you'd want to do?" And I was like, well, yeah, absolutely. Teaching karate was one of the best parts of my life, and now jumping back into it, it feels like I never left, and it's awesome. So that was my long-winded journey.
No, it's not long-winded. Why, and obviously you don't have to answer this question, but why did you take that step away in the first place?
My life was going in an interesting direction. So I was previously married, and no fault to her. In all honesty, I was a very different person. I had a lot of rough edges, and I wasn't. I there are plenty of mistakes that I made, and I could have been much kinder of a person. And I think a lot of times my ego wasn't in check, which I think happens with a lot of martial artists. Not to make any excuses, but it was definitely something that I knew I needed to take a step away from and focus on myself for a little bit. So I gave up drinking. I'm actually almost 8 years sober completely. So
Congratulations.
yeah, I traded it for another vice. So
That's okay.
So now it's coffee.
I have a similarity. Christopher and I don't drink either. And if he was here, he talks about his sobriety all the time. So it's not like I'm saying anything that he wouldn't feel comfortable saying, but Christopher is about 13 or 14 years sober.
Wow. Good
Yeah,
for him.
so he's
That's
been
awesome.
sober for a long time. He says this, and again, he would not mind me saying this. He says that he put a lifespan of drinking in like the years that he did it. So he's good. But that's really awesome. Congratulations. How was
Thank
that
you.
process?
Weird at first. I think the hardest part was feeling you're missing the social aspect. And especially, being still in my 20s at the time, it felt tough for me. And I was still
Sure.
growing, I still had that kind of like, what is good for me attitude that now I feel like everyone, I could lie and say it's not there, but everyone has that, you have to look out for yourself too. But I definitely, try and consider other people first now. But back then, it was like, I don't want to miss out. It's always me. I don't want to miss out. So that was tough at first. But things like seltzer sounds silly, but cans of seltzer or going to the bar and ordering a seltzer with a lime in it,
Yeah, really not a silly thing.
Yeah.
So don't feel silly, and don't let anyone make you feel silly.
Well, you know what's cool is that you would think that, but people have been so supportive every step of the way. I can't think of one person who was not supportive of that. Even people that I would commonly, go out to the bar with, they're like, "Oh, that's awesome," So it was really cool. You see the beauty of humanity in those moments,
Right?
I think when you see that you can have fun without it, it makes people start to question it in their life too, and they're like, "Oh, I can have fun without, not remembering it tomorrow."
That's awesome, man. Good for you. Now, did you get sober? Well, like in your timeline, like up here, or was it while you were still in?
It was while I was still here. Yeah.
Okay.
So I had gotten to the point we used to go to Boston on St. Patrick's Day. And I still think it's such a cool place to go on St. Patrick's Day. They have this really cool pub crawl, all through Faneuil Hall, and it's fun. But it was supposed to be such a fun night, and we all had it planned, and I just got so drunk that I ruined the night, and I realized that, I just wanted to be better, because it's not fair to her, and I want to be a good husband, and, I just think that there's so much outside of your control when you're drinking, and why,
Yeah.
not to insult anybody who does, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who can drink responsibly, but
Yeah.
just like anything I do in life, I go 100%.
Yes.
So
I definitely have that
yeah.
gene in me. Like, if you know me, it's either black or it's white. I have positively no gray area like in my blood at all. So
Maybe it's an Italian thing.
it
I
must
don't know.
be. I don't know. No gray area. So I completely understand. Was this something that you just made the decision and you did?
It was the next day. Yep, the very next day. I said no more, and that was it. That was my last drink, and I was DJing at the time.
Wow.
This was me trying to put my life back together. So I had moved home for a stint and got a job DJing, and I did that for a few years. That's where I actually met my wife too.
Oh, how fun!
Yeah, so
nice.
At a karaoke night, so and it was history since then.
That's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And sometimes it's it's a very vulnerable thing.
Yeah. The more time you spend with me, you'll know it's not hard to get information out of me. It's harder to stop me.
So okay, so you are here, you get sober, and then you move.
Fort Wayne was awesome. I met some people that are going to be part of my life forever. So amazing people, including my jiu-jitsu coaches. So they were so not what I expected. So you see a lot of that Brazilian jiu-jitsu ego online sometimes, and these guys were just absolutely wonderful. You know, they embraced me. They were my instructor, Chet. The first thing he had said was, you know, on my first day, he said, you know, don't look for the differences, look for the similarities. You know, and he wanted me to embrace what I knew and supplement it with jujitsu. He was always so cool about that. But everyone there was awesome. And then even at where I worked, you know, everyone was so friendly. That whole Midwest charm, you know, it's a real thing.
It is.
You know, and me and Jackie, when we moved out there, we were expecting something completely different. But it's a beautiful city, beautiful city. It's incredibly diverse, and just met amazing people. So yeah, that was the hard part about leaving.
Sure. Yeah.
The second hard part was there's like no taxes. So coming back to New England was rough.
Yeah, right.
But besides that, yeah, it was a good experience. I loved it. Yeah.
That's awesome. And how long were you there?
I was there for about 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's crazy how like quick it can be, you know, how quickly 5 years, 6 years can just like go.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And we've got nieces here. So now, you know, we were watching them grow from a distance. That was rough.
Yeah.
So now we're back, and it's so much better. You know, I think I enjoy the overall living experience out there more, just because, like I said, everyone is so nice. I remember bumping into someone and them saying sorry, and I was like, it was my fault. I'm sorry, you know, and just realizing that, you know, the people out there are just so polite. It's such a different experience. Even driving out here is crazy. I pulled out of a road, and the guy that was coming the other direction had like a good like 20 seconds before he would even be close to me, and he's honking on the horn. I'm like, why?
Yeah, it's the amount of just like adrenaline and stress to live here. And this is what I try, and obviously you're from here, so like you understand, but some people who don't live here, or like friends of ours who like come up, or who are from like different parts of the country, or even just like different parts of the world, they're just like, man, it's just like intense. Like there's just like an anger of just like I said, just like high adrenaline, and just like everyone's ready to fight all the time. And people look for it. Like they love to get pissed in traffic. Like they love that shit. And it's incredibly frustrating to like live here. Because you're like tired all the time, because you're just like, oh man, am I like something happens, or you know, you accidentally hit someone with your shopping cart or something, and you're just like, fuck, am I gonna have to like get into an argument?
Yeah. Being back with, you know, family, that's definitely more, you know, important. You know, so had to put it on a scale and, you know, think about what we wanted more, and it was definitely coming back for our nieces. And
that's awesome. I heard someone say to me one time, and I think about it a lot because like I haven't done it yet, but I heard someone say once of like, if you ever have the opportunity to move somewhere, always take it, because you already know that you like where you were, and it's not going to go anywhere. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, things might change, but it's like you can always go back. You know, so if you didn't have that experience, I'm sure things wouldn't have happened for you how it did, you know?
Yeah.
So
I don't know what I would have been doing if I'd never left, you know? So I don't know if I would have gotten pulled back. I would like to hope I would have, but everything happens for a reason.
Right. So you were in Fort Wayne.
Yes.
And then you were there for 5 years, and then you come back. And how long ago was that?
Only about 6 months now.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't been home that long.
Yeah. Shit, I didn't know that.
It feels, you know, I grew up here, so
yeah, it's like
you know, I've only been gone 5 years. Nothing's changed too much.
Yeah, right.
I love getting back in and teaching, you know, in a much different role than I was before. Now, you know, there's a lot more operational stuff on me. I did a lot of sales in Fort Wayne. That was pretty much my whole career out there was sales. So I've gotten a little bit savvy with, you know, that kind of part of it, but a lot of the, you know, technical marketing stuff is still outside my realm. So getting used to it, you know, I'm hoping that I take to it, you know, but we'll see.
How do you feel now, kind of diving back into what you had before, you know?
Kind of awesome. Yeah, it felt like something I lost and then found. Like if you had a best friend and then all of a sudden for some reason you guys got stripped from each other and then found each other again. And that's kind of what it feels like. Like teaching martial arts with my second family, is has always been a big part of my life. So coming back, it didn't feel out of place and it didn't even feel like I needed to try and, fit somewhere I'd never been before. I just felt like I was stepping back in where I left, which was awesome, and most of us have changed a lot, over the years. So it
Yeah,
was a
for
decent amount
sure.
of time then in between, I think it was about 8 years in between. Um, it was just felt like the old days again, and it was awesome, just with a new twist.
Right,
More
yeah,
responsibility, and we're
sure.
all, not kids anymore. We were teaching, most of us, in our young 20s. So it was very different.
Mm-hmm.
We were all, still growing and hormones still going crazy. And so, um, but yeah, it's been awesome. And then reconnecting with a lot of people out here, even in the martial arts world, has been awesome. And meeting, you and Christopher has been awesome too.
It was certainly an interesting
Hmm.
meeting, I guess. It was certainly like an interesting introduction to
Yeah.
each other. Walk us through a little bit about like you coming back. Obviously, it's only been 6 months, which I did not know, and kind of you going and teaching now, and then kind of like how you've kind of been like doing what you do now. Kind of like
Hmm.
walk us through that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I train in Shaolin Kempo,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't have the absolute best reputation ever. Like much of the hybrid systems, I feel like there's, because we're not super traditional, we get a lot of flack from the super traditional people, and then because we're not, a pure combat sport, we get a lot of flack from that side. So we're right in the middle, and it's, you would hope that we're loved by everybody, but it's just it's one of those things. Having people in that community, I feel like is such a fun, it's such a cool thing, even to just, hang out and share ideas. I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu on the combat sports side. Also trained with a good friend of mine named Ryan DeShong. You're watching, you probably aren't, but if you are, but and he was a Shuriru
Okay.
black belt, so he was on the traditional side, opposite end of the spectrum. And I love making those connections because it helps me feel more like the bridge that our styles are. Kempo should be a bridge between the traditional and, the combat sport. And I remember seeing all these videos, pop up, um, because I'm on that Kempo Past and Present channel. Yeah.
God.
So I always see those things coming through my feed. And I remember seeing a bunch of videos of you and your instructor and Mr. Tatum, who I'm familiar with from my uncle. And I was like, whoa. I was like, that's so cool. Like I would love to meet and like just see where the similarities and the differences are, which has been such a cool experience so far.
Mm.
And it's been awesome to be able to work with you.
Mm.
But my uncle was an old school Parker black belt.
Mm.
So he started with the Tracy's, and then he got kind of adopted by uh, Huck Planis. And I believe, and I apologize if I get any of these details wrong, but I believe he was his main teacher after that. But getting to, he kind of worked with me and my brothers when we were younger. He wanted to pull us up through the ranks, but they lived far away, so we didn't get too far.
How many brothers do
I've got two.
you have? Oh, cool.
So one of them trained up to purple belt in American Kempo.
Mm-hmm.
And my other brother is actually going to be testing for his second degree in Shaolin Kempo this weekend.
Oh, nice.
So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So, we are a martial arts family. The one that did American Kempo, he's kind of fell out of it for a while. So I'm hoping that we can pull him back in. He said he doesn't remember anything anymore. So it's been long enough where
Yeah.
it's gone.
It's also not true. I
Yeah,
feel like when people say that, be like, oh, I don't remember anything ever. Maybe, but your body doesn't forget.
yeah, it's
You
buried
know,
in there somewhere.
it is in there somewhere, like absolutely somewhere. And every person I've met or trained, like, even Adam, for example, just using him because I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying this about him, but he's like, oh, like before I knew you did Kempo, I hadn't trained in like, I don't know, 8 years or 10 years or like something ridiculous. He's like, I didn't even like I would practice, but I didn't think I would really remember much. And it's just
Hmm.
like, and then he started doing it, and I'm like, see, like flawless, like your body doesn't forget sometimes. If you
Yeah,
have any sort of athleticism as well, that helps.
maybe.
Yeah.
I, I, it's so funny. I feel like my athleticism came from martial arts.
Hmm.
I was that kid that, at gym class when, they're picking teams, like, they would fight at the end about who had to take me because I was actually a detriment to the team,
Yeah, same. I actually almost failed gym because I was like, fuck this. And yeah, I get it. I never did anything. I wouldn't change. I didn't want to play fucking flag football, volleyball, stupid shit and get like decked in the head with a volleyball. Like, I was good. So I didn't really do it either. But I did this. And then, yeah, I almost failed gym. And I was like, all right, well, what do I go to do to not fail? And they're like, oh, just pass like the fitness, like the standardized like fitness testing. And
Yeah.
I was like, all right. So I did. And then not only did I do it, but then I broke the record for the school. And I was like, that. That's awesome though. So that way you kind of were training a little bit like with your brothers and everything, and
Hmm.
your uncle was a direct student of Huck, is what I hear you say.
Yeah,
Cool.
he had a number of teachers, but I think Huck, especially towards the end, was his main teacher.
That's awesome.
I know I think he teaches a student, but it's not his main job.
Mm-hmm.
So he works in a shop, mechanical, car,
Mm-hmm.
automotive shop, like guru.
Yeah.
So yeah, if he could fix anything,
Mm-hmm.
so he is like the manliest person I've ever met. So it's just like slicked back hair. He's got the leather jacket, lizard skin boots, just very, very Sicilian. Yeah.
So then you started kind of around that time, like you obviously were training at that point, but then you started to train with your uncle.
No, that was a long before.
Oh,
So
okay,
he
okay, okay.
was we used to spend a lot of time at our cousin's house. So we were close, just not in distance. So we were about an hour away,
Mm-hmm.
but we would go up there at least once a month. And he had, his own little training room. It was like a mini dojo in his house. So, and we would go there and he would, teach us. So, and I remember, and that's the only reason why I remember things like delayed sword, um, and aggressive twins, which is not in the system anymore. No. So, but yeah, it's a long time ago. So long before I started training.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd always want to see what I was training now. He'd
Mm-hmm.
say, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing?" And, and I'd show him, and he'd tell me it doesn't work. And then I always loved his input because he is incredibly knowledgeable. I mean, he trained for many years, and he's a smart guy. Um,
Now, what rank did he achieve under Hook?
so I know he's got his second degree black belt, and then he said he didn't even want that. He said back then they were kind of like rebelling against higher ranks, so they didn't want to have stripes.
Why did that
I
happen?
don't know. I don't know.
It's an interesting. I can't say I've ever heard someone
I think
say that.
the curriculum, depending on when you learned it, and you might have to correct me on this because this is definitely not the ed part of history and lineage. It's not my strong suit. But I think the entire curriculum at one point was under black belt. and there was no curriculum above black belt, and it was just time served and efficiency?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that question. I couldn't tell you for sure, but what I do know is that there were obviously different series, right? So there were different series that were made. You did like, you had like the 36 series and the 24 series and the 16 series, and where techniques were broken down. So maybe, your uncle might be correct in that, of like, if you did a 32 series and, you had 32 techniques or whatever the case may be, or however it was that was done, yeah, that could be a possibility, that you had the full curriculum by the time you reached first degree. So that might be true. Someone somewhere will correct us.
Someone will be offended.
Yeah, which
I apologize in advance.
Don't
Not
apologize.
my intention.
No need.
I only apologize for my ignorance, not your anger.
So that's cool. So you were training, obviously, and then you had trained with your uncle a little bit with like American Kempo stuff, and then you have fallen back, obviously, and everything into teaching and to business and stuff. And then you said, which we all hate, past, present, and future, or at least I do not like it, but sometimes it can be helpful to a degree for knowledge like this. But you said you saw one of my videos in there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I forget exactly what was going on, but I remember, I think you were scooping one leg and then scraping down the other and then striking up as the head came down. And I was like, man, that's pretty in line with the stuff that we do, and I was like, how cool, and to make that bridge from my uncle's style too was really neat. We tend to gravitate, towards our base styles, which I think is important. You find something you really love, and then you dig deep. I know a handful of people that will just bounce style to style to style to style, and they never really get to the good stuff, and I feel like the good stuff is when you really dig deep. But then, there's the other end of it, where there are some people who they only dig deep and they never want to experience anything else, and they never want to, break bread with someone, in a different style. I like to branch out. I like to talk with other martial artists, do things like this. Why anyone want to listen to me for an hour and a half is beyond me. Meeting you, I've got friends in Tang Sudo that have, some shared kata, which is really cool. And I'm hoping to do some stuff with them too. And I feel like the more you do it, it teaches you more about your own style than anything.
I really appreciate that. And I have a few friends or just people that I know that kind of, they play here and then they go play here and then they go play here. And like, they're just like such golden retriever energy, like just so happy to be here, not like having no sense of like, oh, I can't be doing this, or like, oh, this is like fucking with my other thing. Like, just so happy to learn and to be there. And I really admire that a lot. And a very, very, very good friend of mine, Justin, who works for Black Belt Magazine and does really cool stuff. He does like everything. Like, he does some Kempo, he does some this, he does some that. Then he does like stunt fighting. Justin is really fucking cool. And I'm so grateful because he's such a good friend of mine and Christopher's. And when he's here and like we'll do training together, because he's always interested in Kempo and stuff. And he goes, oh, well, we have this in Kung Fu, and we have this, and we have this. And I'm like, man, that's really fucking cool, because, like, I just know Kempo, and, like, that's it. Yeah. Like, I'm a one-trick pony, like, that's all I got. Justin said to me one day, and I thought I wasn't sure, like, how I took it, but it was really nice. And maybe you feel similar, to this type of way, but he said, so is Kempo all you do? And I was, I was actually, like, embarrassed when he asked me that, because this dude is like so well versed in literally anything. He can fight, he can spar, he can do like, I don't know, crazy kung fu things, and he can also act with his stunting, like so proficient in everything, right? He's just like an awesome guy. And he asked me, he goes, so is this like all you do? And I was embarrassed because I was just like, yeah, like I don't know as much as you do. Like I really felt less than, but I know he didn't mean it that way at
Yeah.
all. That's just like how I took it. And he was like, oh, okay. And I think I made a comment of like, yeah, I think I made the joke of like, yeah, I'm just like kind of a one trick pony. Like that's all I know how to do is Kempo. And he laughed. He thought it was funny. And then like a few minutes pass and he goes, hey, actually, that's really impressive.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? He's like, it's actually really impressive that like you've never done anything else. Like to commit to one thing for such a long period of time and be able to like not only do it, but then like continue to do it. He's like, a lot of people just don't have that. And he's like, it's really impressive. And I was like, oh thank God. Like I was that made me really happy, but you know, I felt a little like, oh, this is
I
it.
think because in Kempo styles, and this is not meaning to be offensive in any
Not
way,
offended.
because as
Yeah.
someone who practices a Kempo style, I feel like a lot of times we play more of the long game
Mm-hmm.
because, honestly speaking, if you go to a boxing gym and you do boxing for 4 months and on the side do wrestling for 4 months, you will be a dangerously proficient fighter
Mm-hmm.
in 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the reality. Um, but I feel like you have this like story arc that's, you start a little bit slower because you build a foundation to build upon that you don't need for other combat sports. And then once you build that foundation, I feel like you become not only a proficient fighter but someone who can continue to fight to old age, which is something that becomes more difficult with your traditional
Mm-hmm.
combat sports. Like Mike Tyson was a great example. Whether he threw the fight or not, the point is, boxing's a tough one to do when you get older. You've got so many concussions under your belt at that point. All your joints are,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
frozen.
yeah.
And then, we see people like our instructors. I know you've
Mm-hmm.
told me stories about yours, and I know stories about mine, who's, getting close to 70 years old, and it's terrifying,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
absolutely
yes.
terrifying.
Yeah.
And I do train in some combat sports, and I often try and test my instructors, just to, push it a little bit, and every time I get so caught off guard with how much they know and how proficient they are. And it's really cool. So, but I feel like most people don't get the opportunity to see that side because you have to invest the time
Correct.
to build that foundation in order to get to that coolness,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think a lot of people have that kind of dedication anymore. They
Yeah.
want that. They want that 4 month
Yeah.
proficiency.
How do you feel now with learning some Kempo now? American Kempo, I should say. How does it feel to you now to learn it and to do it?
It's. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome because I see a lot of the similarities between what I do. It almost seems like there's different tactics, and so the movements are slightly different because the tactics are different.
Mm.
So we'll say, oh well, we're doing this because of this, but you're doing this because of this,
Mm-hmm.
and they're both very valid. And it's really cool to see because and I tell all my students this, that I think cross training is always a good idea, not to abandon your style, but to see how other people move, because especially when you get up into the higher ranks, like black belt and beyond, you know, you start to move a lot like the other people around you,
Yes.
which is normal. That's,
Mm-hmm. But it can also be a very bad thing.
it can, yeah,
Yes.
it's because then if you ever did get into an altercation, God forbid, I hope that I never have to fight. I've been in plenty of them when I was younger, and but I don't want to hurt anybody. But if something did happen, I can't expect that some rando on the street is gonna move the same way that someone I'm sparring with on a regular basis is going to. And I feel like the more people you work with in different styles, the more variability you get.
Mm-hmm.
So not to change your style, but to become more proficient in your style. So I still use the same principles that I learn in my style, um, but it gives me that it gives me that edge where I'm like, oh, well, I know that if I was working with Karamia, she would punch me in the face here, you know. So maybe that's not. I need to make sure that's checked, because maybe it's not something that I would expect from someone else. I worked with my instructor the other day, and he was doing this movement, and he said block, and I said okay, and he proceeded to punch me I think 6 times, and every time I couldn't figure out where that punch was coming from, and it was driving me nuts, and I was like, oh my gosh, how, and it's just I don't get to work with him that often, and granted, you're not going to meet someone usually with that level of proficiency, but I'm used to being able to see things, even noticing small things like little shoulder movements, telling me a punch is coming, or hip movements, or the head moving backwards. But I could not see it. And it's not like it was a little snap either. These punches had weight. I just feel like the more people you work with, the easier it is to become, I guess, proficient. I said proficient like 9 times, so I wanted to use a different word, but
It's all good. It's all good.
Left my thesaurus at home.
You know what? Maybe past, present, future isn't so bad after all, because you ended up here because of it. That makes me happy, but it also makes me happy that you also have kind of like found your own way in what it is that you want.
Curious to know what you think about this, because when I was just starting to get into teaching, so I must have been very young 20s. I remember deep diving the internet, which was a new concept at the time. I think I had just gotten off like AOL, but I remember going into forums and wanting to search my style and seeing the brutal comments and getting shaken, because it's like, oh man, and you start to second guess yourself. And like I said before, until you really build that foundation, there's a slow start for a reason, because everything we do is built off of a pretty intricate foundation. But have you ever been in that situation? Have you ever scrolled the forums?
Not necessarily scrolled the forums, but I've received what you saw. Like, I've received a lot of hate and bullshit, but like I don't care. The only time I would ever care is if my sensei cared.
Yeah.
But he doesn't care. He doesn't care in the way that is like, oh, you need to take that down right now, or this or that. Ask me a question again. Like, have I ever cared?
Yeah, well, and more geared towards your younger self, because I mean, obviously, I don't really care what people say now.
Yeah.
I know what I like.
Right.
Yeah. And that's all there is to it.
So did my younger self care what people thought
about my art? Yeah.
That's a good question. I don't remember having feelings about what anyone said. And it's not because I probably didn't have them, or like maybe I did. I don't remember. But I just remembered that my wanting for it and my wanting to do it outweighed what anyone thought. So did it maybe have an effect, or did I maybe think about it, or was I maybe doing something and was just like, okay, yeah. It like crossed and then it was gone, because like it just always outweighed me. What outweighed that was me wanting to do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So even now, it's like when I was young, I don't really remember ever feeling that way of like questioning what I was doing.
That's awesome. Better than me, But then again, I told you about my childhood. I was very self-conscious even until my mid-20s, and that's, I think,
you're not alone. I still get self-conscious too sometimes, but again, it's like my want for the thing, or maybe just like my confidence in the thing, outweighs like how I feel about something for a little while.
That's awesome.
Like,
yeah.
The beautiful thing about the internet, to a degree, and like more so now, I mean, maybe like whatever, when you got, someone asked me kind of recently, I forget who it was, but um I forget who it was. Maybe it was even you. I'm not sure. But someone had asked me like, "Oh, has anyone ever come in and like challenged you before?" And I was like, "No."
I don't think I asked
Yeah,
that,
I
but
was
that's
like,
funny.
I cannot remember who it was, but someone was like, "Oh, has ever anyone like really come in and like like challenged you?" And I'm like, "Fucking no!" Like, I don't know. This is no, but the internet is now the place for that.
Yeah.
And Andy Frisella, I was listening to Andy Frisella the other day, and he said, something beautiful that has happened over the past year, 2 years, whatever, however long the internet has been just like more of like a rough place to be, is that I've gotten so accustomed to being called names and to being called like, every name in the book, and like having like you like David Goggins thing of like, you can't hurt me because like if whatever you're gonna say, I've probably already heard it times two.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't there's really nothing that you're gonna say to me that I haven't heard already, and that's original. Like, so for me, no, I haven't really ever, especially when I was younger, ever thought, because I really saw this like a ticket.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I really saw this as like a ticket out. So I remember just making the decision of like, I like it. I like doing this. And I'm like kind of good at it. And I really wasn't good at a lot of stuff. But I was like, I'm kind of good at it. And I just like, I remember making the decision of like, well, if you're good at it and you kind of like it, I think you just need to do it. And then I just made the commitment to doing it regardless of how I felt. Like my feelings didn't matter.
That's awesome. That's actually really cool.
Oh,
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sorry that you had that experience.
Oh,
but it's also like,
if anything, I would become very challenging of my instructors. Say, well, what if they did this?
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, but what if I did this? Right. You gotta hate. Yeah, now I get it tenfold from my students.
It's
like,
best.
well, what if I did this?
I
like,
love
okay,
it.
well then
I love when my students do that to me, because I was saying to you last night, it makes you better.
It does.
It makes you better.
That's it's always having that answer. Every now and then they throw a wild card. I was like, well, why would anyone do that? Yeah. But if they did, I'll figure it out. Right. So, but yeah, I think it made me better. And my instructor was always awesome. He never criticized me for being for questioning, which I think is awesome. And I think that's I think the best instructors are like that. He always appreciated the fact that I was questioning things, and he always had a really good answer. And if he didn't, he would tell me. That's awesome. I think I was lucky, to have a really good instructor. Sounds like you were too. So
yeah, I am.
I'm not just pointing to the air. There's a picture.
There's a photo over here. So, anything you want to end with, or anything that you want to touch on, or anything you kind of want to finish off with? Or?
I don't know.
Stories you want to tell?
I don't know. I think my favorite part about being a guest on a podcast is I just have to answer the questions. I don't have to come up with the topics, I think everything I've done in life has always pointed me in the direction of martial arts. So I think I was always in the right place at the right time to put me here. So I feel like this is what I was supposed to do. And I think when you get a calling like that, it's kind of hard to ignore. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah.
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 So
I think that's like your higher self. That's what I believe. It's like your intuition, like your higher self is like calling you to do something.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes like you really can't ignore it. And
I think it's awesome that finding people like you and Christopher who are so open to crossing the picket line, and I hope to find more people like this, because I think that's the beauty. We're a lot of times people think the karate community, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community, but it should be the martial arts community. And there's not enough people who want to be part of that community. They want to be part of their internal circle, but they don't want to be part of the community as a whole. And with styles in the hybrid category, like American Kempo and Shaolin Kempo, and we're like, if this was school, we're like the theoretical physicists, you know?
Yeah.
So you have the jocks, you know,
Yeah.
like the Muay Thai and,
Mhm.
you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you know, then you have the karate people. I'm trying to think of what they would be. But
We're like really,
mathematicians maybe, because
yeah, but
everything's
like if mathematicians, and I was talking about this with Adam kind of recently, like if we were all like weird punk, you know, kind of we're in like the rock kid, like who definitely played in a band at one point,
yeah.
and then like took up Kempo because it was cool, and then like really enjoyed it. You know, we're like kind of a mix of all of those types of things.
I feel like that's a really cool community to make more cohesive. So I do tend to like those Facebook groups as long as, you know, people aren't being dumb, which, you know, they often are. You know, you see some nasty comments towards a lot of people and you're like, why? Like, why are
Yeah.
you here if you why are you even on this page
Yeah.
if you want to, you know, go and say that would never work or that's garbage or this? It's like, okay, well, you don't have to be here.
Yeah.
But I do like the goal, and I'm assuming the goal of pages like that is to bring people like us together.
Yeah,
So
and I'm glad that it did its job. You know?
yeah, yeah, and I hope
And
it. Like you said, you've got some students from your posts, right?
yeah, so weird. Yeah,
Yeah,
so weird, and it's always strange to me when people like message me or call me or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, I want to come train because like I saw your post," and I always get so like bashful. You know, it's like a very I get bashful about it because I'm like, "Oh no, which one?" But yeah, it's a very humbling. You know, it's a very humbling thing. So.
I've noticed there seems to be like almost this renaissance in adult martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there's a I feel like a desire for it that there hasn't been in years. Uh, um, so I don't know if that's playing into. You said most of the students you were getting from online were adults,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I
I think there's a need right now.
yeah, I think also people sometimes want to be a part of something,
Hmm.
um, and they they want to be a part of something that is hard, right? But they don't want to just listen to people who do CrossFit all day. You know,
Yeah.
like if someone does CrossFit, don't worry, they'll tell you. You know what I mean? Or if someone does Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, don't worry, they'll tell you when
Hmm.
you have those kind of like extremists of people. And I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that because I am also an extremist in
Yeah.
what I do. But you knew that when you came here. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So sometimes I think people just want something that you can have fun with and learn a lot and like really like sweat, bleed, the whole shebang. And like I was saying to you last night, and just like relax. Like you can
Mm.
relax about it. It's a delicate thing because you can't all of the time, in my opinion, be like, oh, okay, like hard
I like that
sensei.
you adjust your glasses
Yeah,
when you said opinion. You know.
yeah. You know, you can't be like hard sensei all the time to adults like you
Hmm.
do to children because they're not children, they're adults. And
Yeah.
if you tell them, hey, I'm gonna need you to shut the fuck up right now and be quiet, they'll be like, okay, no problem. You know what I mean? You can't say that to a kid.
Yeah.
And when you just treat them like adults and then they listen and they pay attention and they learn and they're so interested, it relieves the pressure off of you as an instructor.
Hmm.
And then it relieves the pressure off of them of like, oh, fuck, I can't even like look in a different direction because sensei's going to know, you know? And I think we've just really found a cool way to make it interesting and obviously still like have its nitty gritty about it. But like, I can chill out, man. Chill. It's okay. You know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I am glad that people have found their way, you know, here and found their way to you and that you found your way here and you know, it
Yeah.
all worked out. Thank you so much for being here. And
Absolutely.
thank you for coming on and thank you for making the trip and give everyone your handles if you want, like Facebook, Instagram, all of that, where they can find you if you want.
Pretty easy to find me. Dominic Lucenti. Instagram, Kempo_reject. Because we are rejects, you know.
But you're Kempo with an M.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Kempo. Yeah, from the Shaolin Kempo system. Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, man. I appreciate you and see you guys soon.
All right.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
I hope that was good. I hope you enjoyed.